Hello, hello, hello. Let me turn the music down a little bit. Um, all right, so I'm going to be doing somewhat on time my quarterly written blog post kind of read through or look through before I post it and share it to WordPress. If you're not familiar with this or haven't been to the channel before or have seen me stream um, something like this, I started doing this towards the end of last year, but I've been writing gaming related blog posts for probably close to 5 years now for like a WordPress website, blogging sort of website where I just write about my thoughts on the games I've been playing. So I do this by quarter. Ideally, if I could finish writing on time and gather my thoughts in a timely manner on what I do play, this would probably publish, or I would share it or do a stream like this like March 31st or even April 1st, or like the end of the quarter, the end of the month and the final part of the quarter, or like the beginning of the next quarter. So like for quarter one it would be, you know, March 31st or April 1st, but due to work and all sorts of other personal things, like that's just my energy levels, that just doesn't happen all the time. So but this is a lot sooner than last year. So yeah, this is I'm gonna read through and kind of share my thoughts on everything that I played and finished from uh January of this year to the end of March. So I always start off my blog kind of post with like a little introduction. So I'm titling it Paralyzed by Choice. And I wrote, so with each passing year, it's become increasingly difficult to stay on top of every new game release. Between mainstream AAA blockbusters, indies, and all of the in-between, gaming continues to be an embarrassment of riches. While you don't and realistically can't play everything, for someone like myself who has a fairly broad range of interests, it's nearly impossible to just pick one game and stick with it. Choice paralysis is definitely a thing, and the first quarter of 2022 has had me paralyzed, mostly in a good way. With that said, despite wrapping up another stressful, busy work season, which I won't like really get into, but if you're somewhat familiar with my streams, I talk about my job very vaguely. But it's tax season, obviously, like from kind of, you know, February-ish through April. And my job's like related to that, so it's a mess. And it was a bad year. And we're not even completely done, technically. So, and then also I've been dealing with a pinched nerve in my elbow since March, which may or may not be getting a little bit better. I have these weird finger gels in my hand, so I look very, maybe you can't see them on the camera too well, but these are helping my fingers. They kind of like numb the feeling. It's bad. So I'm a mess. But with that said, here are the games that I managed to roll credits on during the first quarter of 2022. So yeah, I typically play a variety of things across like all platforms and consoles, like whether they're new releases or older like retro games. I try to keep like a pretty broad. I juggle a lot. I juggle like a lot of games all at once. So I'm always jumping between at least like a dozen or so games like at once. Big and small. Like I've been playing Elden Ring and Horizon Forbidden West still, and I don't think I'll finish them for months because I kind of pick at them. So usually I finish like a bunch of smaller games during this time of the year. So we're gonna start with. I started my year, and this is a tradition actually. I started my year with a replay technically, because I haven't played it since I was a kid, of Mega Man 5. So at the start of each year, I typically play something old school or retro as a sort of palate cleanser. I've been replaying classic Mega Man games from Capcom's Mega Man Legacy Collection for the past few years, and Mega Man 5 was next on the docket. Mega Man 5 felt mostly unremarkable, although I still enjoyed revisiting the game. As the fifth mainline entry, you can sort of see the developers' waning creativity. Some of the bosses felt phoned in, like Stone Man, and the stage design, outside of a few, felt uninspired. Gravity Man stage was probably the most interesting mechanically with its inverted controls and upside down sections, but it feels like something that's been done before in one of the earlier Mega Man titles. Mega Man 5 feels even easier and more streamlined than 4. Extra lives are plentiful and drop frequently from enemies, or maybe I was just lucky. Stages don't overstay their welcome, checkpoints are mostly fair, and the bosses are surprisingly unaggressive outside of a few. There are also hidden letters to collect in each stage which spell out Mega Man 5, and if you collect them all, you unlock Beat, which is a helpful bird that will assist you when called upon. Most NES or old school Mega Man games in particular are one and done experiences with few hidden items or collectibles, so it was nice to see an attempt at adding an extra incentive for exploration and a keen eye. That's kind of a run-on sentence. I probably won't edit too much of this, to be honest. And the password saves your progress too, which I was really surprised about. Usually, like, password systems in old NES games, they don't save, like, they save a very default state of your character. It depends on the game, obviously. Like Castlevania games, you always restart at the beginning of the level with, like, your default, you know, player status, like, what is it, whatever, like 3 lives, like no sub-weapon. But this game actually, the password saved these letters that you collected in the levels, which I thought was pretty cool. I completed Mega Man 5. Oh, I skipped a line. Just like Mega Man 4 before it, there are 2 Wily castles. But again, the additional castle felt unnecessary and more like padding than anything else. Although some of the stages were fairly challenging and well designed. I completed Mega Man 5 with all of the letters collected without using save states or the rewind feature, which I have no problem with, but I always bring that up. I generally prefer to play like old school retro games as if they were on the old hardware, so I use... Now, in this game's instance, I wouldn't type in the password, even though that would be like kind of more nostalgic and fun. I save state on the password when it gives it to me, and then I kind of like load it as if I were to type it in, and that's how I play a lot of these old school games. Unless the game's like completely impossible, I'll rarely use like a save state or rewind or whatever features they give you to like get through it. So that's just like a personal thing. I like to try to finish them kind of how they were intended to be finished. But I don't have any issues with, with using those things. So it was a mostly inoffensive, forgettable Mega Man title, and that felt more like an obligation. That felt like more like an obligation and nothing else. So here's to my replay of Mega Man 6 in 2023. Yeah, so with, actually, Nagase, with my writing, I'm still trying to find, like, how I want to write. Because, like, ideally, if I had all the time in the world, and I did this for a living, I would want to do, like, reviews. Like, traditional reviews for every game that I play. And do, like, proper YouTube videos where you, like, edit in. Like, I would record everything that I play, then edit and talk over it, and just, whatever. Do what, like, YouTubers do. But I don't have the energy for it, so I'm trying to do, like... I like writing... Or I at least like to write down... I can't not play something and write thoughts down. So I need to like just throw them on paper essentially, which is a blog post, and then I'm like, all right, well I started streaming, so I might as well just read what I'm writing and try to incorporate it. But yeah, my reading is kind of more my writing about whenever I write about games, it's like some of it's like sometimes mini reviews or like just kind of weird deep dives on certain things that spoke to me like mechanically, or I just bring up, I mean, there are probably 1,000 YouTube channels and people who have covered, especially Mega Man or anything popular, to death. So like, what can I say in 2022 about this game at this point that hasn't been covered like in a million blogs or website articles or YouTube analysis? Like, so I was like, what can I fucking say about this game other than it's so unmemorable? I mean, I grew up with Mega Man. I love Mega Man still, but like by the time I got to Mega Man 5 and just kind of revisiting it now, and I haven't played it since like probably the GameCube Anniversary Collection. It was just like in one ear out the other. I was like, all right, well that was fun to replay. Hey Quasi, it's been a while. How are you? So yeah, but I like to start my year with an old school game because it kind of grounds me. Like I wrote, it sort of like acts as a palate cleanser before I start like anything else. So it's like I like to remind myself like where I came from and like what I played growing up, like at the start of each year. I don't know. It's like a fun tradition. So I've been slowly getting through the old like revisiting the Mega Man games through the Anniversary Collection. It's been fun for the Legacy Collection. I fell behind on X Games. I need to catch up on those. I've been playing the Mega Man regular because they're like a lot quicker. Thanks, Quasi. I hope you've been well too. Alright, so that was the first game I finished of 2022, Mega Man 5. It was alright. It's Mega Man. So, second game is Clockwork Aquario? Aquario? Yeah, well, that's what I was saying at the beginning, Quasi. Like, ideally, if I had all the energy and like time to dedicate towards like streaming or whatever content creation, which I don't even know if what I'm doing. I'm so down on like what I do. I'm completely like, I never feel like I'm like streaming the correct, well, whatever. I wouldn't want to say like streaming the correct things, but like, I'm never, I guess I'll say I'm never happy with what I like produce or whatever I like whenever I stream certain things. But like ideally, like if I had, like I said, like all the energy or time, like I would love to do like just traditional game reviews, like YouTube videos, like where you edit or splice in like actual recorded gameplay of the games I've been playing, because I don't stream everything that I play, obviously. But I've been writing for years. Like I've been writing on this blog post for like 5 years. So I'm like, why not I just incorporate this into the stream? There's a way to like integrate both of them, because I do this anyway and I don't think I can stop writing about games. I was telling Nagase earlier that like I've gotten to a point where like I can't just play something and then just let it go in one ear out the other without just putting like words down somewhere, whether it's like a throwaway tweet on Twitter or something. I don't know. So I've been writing on this like WordPress site that I made for a couple years, and that's where we're at. So well, I appreciate it, Quasi. All right, so game number 2, Clockwork Aquario. Yeah, I'll get to that in a second, actually. So Clockwork Aquario, originally developed by West One, is a 2D action platformer arcade game that never saw the light of day until now. In Clockwork Aquario, you choose from 3 different characters. I'm not sure if there's any gameplay differences, but the robot is very tall. And from there, you'll tackle 5 stages, which culminate in boss encounters. Along the way, you'll kill enemies in succession by grabbing and tossing them into each other, similar to Klonoa, again, which is like one of my all-time favorite games. Which will make them drop gems. Collect enough gems and you'll gain an extra life, and that's the gist of it. There's normal, hard, and arcade modes available, and the game gives you a set amount of continues that you use for each difficulty, which I appreciated. This is actually a very like particular thing I like about arcade games. Give me a set amount of continues in an old school retro game, and I'll work within those limitations until I improve. Clockwork Aquario's visuals are bright and colorful, and the sprites are chunky and detailed. The game simply looks good. I love sunset endings. I've loved like driving off, or like kind of whether you're flying. Usually, all right. So like Resident Evil games, if you're familiar with them, like they usually end, especially the old ones, in like helicopter rides, like into the sunset. So I'm sold. If your game ends with like some sort of drive into the distance, like into the horizon with the sunset, then I'm kind of sold on it. That's like a fun little thing I like about how certain games end. This is a screenshot from like the end of the game. I had no idea that Clockwork Aquario was a canceled project, so it was wild to see it resurface in late 2021. I discovered the game from someone random on Twitter tweeting about how they thought it felt like it was a precursor to Klonoa Door to Phantomile, so I had to play it. That's true as well. I literally didn't know anything about this game till someone was like, this game's like a precursor to Klonoa, or they were questioning it, and I'm like, all right, well, I gotta buy this. Apparently, releasing the game in the state that it's in was quite the endeavor. On the actual blog post, which I'm going to post after I do the stream, there's a link to like an interview or kind of another website did an article on like this game's development history and how kind of like wild it was. I completed the game 3 times, 2 of which were on normal and once on hard, which included a 1 credit clear run, 1 CC in brackets, which is what it stands for. You ever play a shooter or shoot 'em ups? You hear people talk about 1 CC, it just means 1 credit clear. 1 credit clear, which means finishing the game in a single credit. If that wasn't already obvious. The sign of a good old school arcade game is if it's both challenging but rewarding to complete a 1 CC run of the game. Clockwork Aquario has its cheap moment or two, as it was originally supposed to be an arcade game, likely designed to eat your quarters, but it's a short and sweet playthrough that can be easily mastered once you know where the enemy spawns are and you've got the boss patterns down. That was a long run-on sentence too. Clockwork Aquario wasn't a mind-blowing experience, but I enjoyed it for what it was worth. And I'd recommend it in a heartbeat if you're looking for your 2D action platformer arcade game fix. Yeah, I really this was a surprise. Like there's a really cool physical, I think it's European only, or imported. I think strictly limited games. They ship internationally as well. I really wanted to get a physical version of it, but it's pretty expensive or it's sold out, so eBay's your only option, but it's like pretty cheap digitally. I think it is. It might be 20 bucks actually. It's kind of expensive. But yeah, if you want like a really short, easy, fun, kind of 2D arcadey feeling game with like cool visuals, and this game like barely existed, like it was a canceled project and then just surfaced last year, and has a pretty like wild, you know, development story, like check it out. It's on most platforms as well, like Switch, PlayStation, Steam, all that good stuff. I think it's on Switch, don't quote me on that. The Gunk. I love the, well, I don't know if I'd love the Gunk, but I liked it. So the 3rd game I finished in 2022 is the Gunk. The Gunk, developed by Image and Form, is the first 3D game from a developer who's mostly known for their 2D action platformers. It is such a great name. If you're familiar with or have played any of the Steam World titles, you might be surprised to learn that the Gunk is from the very same people. The most impressive thing about the Gunk to me is the fact that the developers went from developing mostly 2D games, as far as I know, to creating an extremely competent 3D action platformer on their first attempt. The Gunk isn't breaking any new grounds, but it's a short and sweet romp through an alien world with some beautiful, ooh, I can edit. I can do a live edit. So with some, oh, it should just be a beautiful color palette. With a beautiful color palette and some impressive visuals. It also just feels good to suck up the, well, gunk. It's almost as satisfying as using the vacuum in Luigi's Mansion or the flood in Super Mario Sunshine. Similar to, I always try to just, when I write about games, and it might be a cop-out, like, technically, but I always try to bring up other games that it reminds me of, just to find some sort of, like, basis, like a basis point for other people to be like, oh, well, I like those games, maybe I'll play this one. Even though it's like, I'm kind of, what's the word for it? I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of. Oh, did I do the wrong palette? Yeah. Thanks, Quasi. Yeah, because I was using the palette as in, like, taste, right? Like, that was the food spelling of it, I think. And it probably didn't come up grammatically wrong. Because it technically... Or spelling wrong, because it was, like, the other way. I think I wrote it as. um, where did I leave off? Oh, so similar to Okami or Kina Bridge of Spirits, you're slowly rejuvenating the land by clearing black tar that has enveloped the planet. When you clear an area of all the goo, plant life, fauna, and colorful flowers spring back to life, and all of it feels visually rewarding at the very least. The same can't be said about the combat or enemy encounters, however. The gunk is very, very easy. There are only a handful of enemy types, and they aren't very interesting to fight. While the combat encounters do add a bit more variety to the overall structure, the game is more about traversing the environment, clearing the gunk, and solving simple platforming puzzles. Similar to the previous games, you collect materials which can be used to upgrade your character. There's also a ton of scanning, so if you like Metroid Prime or any other modern day adventure game that has a scanning mode, and there's plenty now, you'll feel right at home here. With that said, there are a ton of missable scans, which makes getting 100% a potential nightmare if you're not thorough. I'd recommend using a guide if you care about unlocking everything. I somehow completed the game with everything collected at 100%, and a playthrough was about 5 hours, so it was the perfect length in my books. I can't wait to see what these developers do next in a 3D space. Yeah, the gunk was like really so if you played SteamWorld Dig, SteamWorld Heist, SteamWorld Quest, they do all the SteamWorld games. As far as I know, this was their first 3D game. I'm like 99% sure they never made a 3D game prior to this. And for a developer that's been making like sprite-based 2D games to just jump to this, and it happened again later on in my list with another game that I played, I thought was super impressive. And I like it for that reason kind of alone. And then the game itself was just pretty... It was short, it was fun. Yeah, I don't know. It was cool. It was a cool little game. Sucking up stuff felt good, which was like the point of it. The enemy encounters were kind of whatever. The combat really wasn't the point of the game. And my biggest pet peeve, like I said, I cannot stand when a game blocks you out of an area. I begrudgingly, or like I love to go for 100% if it's not too ridiculous. Like I'm a completionist at heart, and even though I don't have the time for everything today, I still like to keep an eye out on like, hey, does this game lend itself to like fully completing? And this game kind of does, but it locks you out of some weird areas for like no reason. And that's just such a weird pet peeve of mine. I'm like, I don't know why developers do that with their games. Like, let the game breathe, A, and B, let like people... If you're gonna make a game about like... If you're gonna make a game about like collecting things or scanning things, like why make them missable? Oh, yeah, so that's a good point, Quasi. Like, so that's one thing with my blog haven't been too happy about. So these are screenshots that I've uploaded. So on Twitter, like I do, whenever I finish a game, I make like a post. But the screenshots are from like my playthrough, but I usually just screenshot like the title screen or like the credits rolled part as a kind of like indicator that I finished it. I rarely include, like even for this game, I didn't include gameplay. Mega Man 5 was just like a screenshot of the end when I finished it. Yeah, and so like I guess with these posts that I do, they're supposed to be quick kind of like summaries, like sometimes mini reviews where I maybe don't fully explain like what the game is, or I hope it maybe comes across a little bit. Like it is like, it's a 3D, just think of like an action adventure, a 3D platformer, where you have like, you know, an arm that like sucks up things in the environment and you just jump around and, you know, pull levers and switches and activate platforms. Like that's what the game is essentially. And you scan a bunch of shit and you can use that to upgrade your character with some things. But yeah, like, yeah, it's I don't know what I want the blog to be. Like I would like to sell people on the game, but it's more of just like a collection of like scattered thoughts I had while playing the game, plus just like, here are some thoughts and I finished it. Like, you know, that's essentially what it is. Not so much like a review to sell it all the time, even though like they do kind of like peek into like review territory when I start writing certain things about them. And I write way more about other games depending on if I feel like I have a lot to say about it. But you're right. Like I don't know, other than what this serves for myself, like I don't really know if it like would help someone like buy the gunk or go for the gunk or not. It's honestly something I've been trying to figure out for myself still, but all right, game number 4. Oh, Oliha, right? I don't think it's not Olija. That would be pronouncing it wrong. I think it's Oliha. So the 4th game I finished for 2022 was Oliha. Oliha, developed by Skeleton Crew Studio, is a 2D action platformer with some light Metroid elements. And that's the other thing I do. I like to include the developer name, so if people were reading it and they want to look up what else they made, I always like to bring that context into it, or like what else has a developer made when I'm writing about it, to give some sort of like legacy to the writing, or point of reference or context, I guess. You're the lord of a nation who's failed his people, so you set sail on a new adventure only to be shipwrecked in a mysterious land due to a storm. A harpoon spear of sorts is your main weapon, and you can use it to combat enemies and traverse the environment. The spear simply feels satisfying to use. Visually and structurally, it's reminiscent of Another World, the original Prince of Persia, or any other PC-style adventure game, but Oliha has more combat and exploration elements than most games in this subgenre. The game takes the player to a handful of islands with distinct themes, enemies, and ruins to explore. At a glance, the game might appear to be non-linear as you choose multiple locations from a map as you progress, but it's mostly a guided experience. There's quite a bit to collect and discover too, but areas, again, this is such a pet peeve, areas will lock you out of them once they're completed, so it's yet another game plagued with potential missables, the bane of my existence. Fortunately, the game isn't very long and it's fun to play, so replay to mop up whatever you've missed isn't the end of the world. So again, I just included a screenshot of like my trophy because it gives like a timestamp. So that's like I got all the trophies in the game, so it shows that I finished it. One minor grievance I have with the game is that there are 40 ships in a bottle to collect, and they're hidden extremely well. I love hidden collectibles in games, especially when they're tucked away as well as they are here. What's frustrating, however, is that many of them are located in areas that become inaccessible once you complete the area. There's no achievements or trophies tied to collecting these bottles, which makes me wonder what their true purpose is. Perhaps there's a secret no one's discovered yet, something the developers didn't expect people to find. There is one person on YouTube who speedran, I should have linked it here, that speedran the game, and they apparently found all 40. The game also, I can't stand this, I don't know why this does this. The game also deletes your save file for no apparent reason after you beat the game, which I found disappointing and odd. I have no idea if the developers were trying to channel some Nier-esque narrative reasoning for doing this. It's most certainly a questionable decision. And that wouldn't make sense unless you've played Nier before, but Nier does something similar when you finish it. I completed the game with 100% of the trophies earned, but I wish there was some sort of new game plus or reason to replay the game, but it's mostly a one and done experience, one that I'd still highly recommend regardless of my gripes with the game structure. Yeah, delete. I don't understand it either, Quasi. It was the weirdest thing, and I actually found out before I finished it, because I was like reading about the bottles. The bottles were bothering the shit out of me, because I'm like, oh my god, I'm actually maybe collecting everything in this game. And then I was enjoying it well enough, and there's like these bottles that are just scattered everywhere. And when I was reading up on it, I came across someone saying like, you know, back up your save file to PS Plus or whatever, because it deletes it if you care enough. And I'm like, why? There's no... I don't even think there's a narrative or story reason for why it does it. Unless I missed it. The story's very like, there's very little dialogue, and it's kind of told, everything's told like visually. So it's one of those games where like the plot's kind of, or the narrative's kind of explained like in visual animations and what's happening in the background, or characters interacting that aren't speaking to each other. So it's a really neat looking game at times, even though it looks, like I said, it looks like If you've played Another World or other kind of PC style adventure games, like Abe's Odyssey even, it's in that vein of a game, but there's more combat and more exploration. I actually really liked it. The structure of it drove me nuts. Like literally you walk into ruins and dungeons and then you walk out of them with no warning and like the door slams shut and you can't go back in. So anything in there that could have been a collectible, like it's like go fuck yourself. For no reason, I don't know why. Yeah, cinematic platformer. Yep. Oh my god, Solar Ash. I loved Solar Ash. Hey, I have an actual picture here. Alright. Solar Ash was my 5th game of 2022. Developed by Heart Machine, is the 3D platformer follow-up to Hyper Light Drifter. In Solar Ash, you skate around a colorful void comprised of alien planets that have been devoured by a giant black hole. Similar to how I felt about the Gunk, Solar Ash is a huge jump from their previous game in terms of size and scope. Hyper Light Drifter was a top-down, pixel-based 2D action-adventure game, while Solar Ash is like some sort of amalgamation between Jet Set Radio and Shadow of the Colossus. It's wild to see how talented some developers are once you see them jump from 2D to 3D. I love to see it, and I want to see this trend continue, especially for certain indie developers who are becoming a bit more established. And I wrote off Yacht Club Games. I'm actually super... yacht. If you're familiar with Yacht Club... Yacht Club Games. Shovel Knight creators. Which is an awesome game, obviously. They announced their new game coming out. It's called Mina the Hollower, I think. And it's like it looks like... Zelda, A Link to the Past. It's like 2D top-down kind of Zelda game, but it's another 2D game. So I'm like... I want to see Shovel Knight in 3D. Just that's all I want at this point. Solar Ash is primarily a puzzle platformer with a simplified combat system. You have a basic 3-hit sword combo, and that's more or less the extent of your arsenal. The enemies aren't very interesting to fight either, but you can lock on to airborne monsters and perform an aerial attack of sorts, although that's not the focus of the game. The objective of the game has you speeding through the environment and destroying special nodes in succession, which releases a towering boss to defeat in each of the game's main areas. Nodes are grouped in special areas and are treated like environmental puzzles. If you're not fast enough traversing from node to node, they reset and you have to try again. This mechanic is carried over to the boss fights as well. So this is where I get very like in the weeds. Like sometimes my mind will start like falling into like explaining the mechanics of a game and just getting maybe too detailed. When I don't have to, but I just feel like I need to write out what I'm like playing, like the mechanics of something. This mechanic is carried over to boss fights as well. These encounters are fairly epic, though, and they are clearly a tribute to Team Ico's Epic, but the way you tackle them isn't super interesting, nor does it really change as you progress. So this game does what like a lot of 3D games do. I noticed that I've talked about this, maybe I tweeted about this before. It's a super tiny detail. Well, maybe it's not tiny, but like I've noticed it since the original Ratchet and Clank. Yeah, that's a good point, Quasi. The original Ratchet and Clank did this, and it's when I first noticed it. But like in Ratchet and Clank, when you first land on a planet, the camera is completely zoomed out. And once you move forward on the analog stick, like the character, you regain control of the character, and the camera kind of goes back to behind the shoulders, or like whatever the normal camera perspective is. This game does something similar, but and other games do this too. Other 3D games do this, but like in certain spots of the world, the camera will like pan back to give you kind of like a scenic environmental shot. And you can control your character during it, but once you like move the camera button or the analog, like it snaps back to like where the player is. But I love when cameras pull back and give you like a wide shot of the game. Solar Ash does it like everywhere. While regular combat leaves a lot to be desired, controlling your character feels buttery smooth and it's just extremely satisfying to control. It's intoxicating to kick up the puffy clouds behind Ooh, behind you. Another error. This is why I should do this before I publish these. As you skate around the environments or when you land from a high jump, it's like dancing on cotton candy. For whatever reason, Solar Ash also reminds me of a PS2, GameCube, Xbox era 3D platformer called Scalar. Does anyone remember that? So shout out to the 3 people out there reading this who might remember that game. Its aesthetic was somewhat similar. Lots of neon greens, yellows, and the color scheme. And you were rail grinding a lot. So if you're looking for... ooh, I forgot to include something here. So if you're looking for your 3D Sonic Ratchet and Clank grind rail fix, your needs will surely be met here. I completed the game on... Put a placeholder here. Let me try to, hold on. Give me a second. So I love 3D platformers.
We should file.
I'm gonna bring a video up in a second. I skip. There's immediately grind railing in it. I loved this game as a kid, or I was a teenager when I played this. Is this guy talking during this? No, so I do 3 X's for placeholders until I find what I'm supposed to write, because I couldn't remember what the difficulty was. So this isn't exactly like Solar Ash, but I love this game. It is really fun. It's such a lost PS2 GameCube era platformer. Anyway. Yeah, so Solar Ash, if you played Solar Ash, and you played Scalar, maybe I wouldn't be the only one making the connection. I feel weird making that thought connection, but like, I was playing this and I'm like, man, I'm just like, I want to play Scalar now. I'm just gonna call this hard difficulty, because I don't remember what it was called. Oh, we're getting there. We're getting there, Nagase. Marsupilami or whatever the fuck. That's coming up, I think, soon. So if you're looking for your 3D Sonic Ratchet and Clank, I already read this. I completed the game on hard difficulty at 100%, but there's an unlockable harder difficulty and a speed run to attempt in order to net the platinum trophy, which I'm not going to do this year. I can't wait to see what these developers do next. So yeah, like similar to how I felt about the Gunk. Like the Gunk and Solar Ash were these like surprise like first 3D game attempts from developers that primarily made 2D games. So I like them for that reason alone. Game number, so the 6th game I finished was a really old school game. Was Adventures of Lolo for the NES. Adventures of Lolo, developed by HAL Laboratory slash Nintendo, is a top-down 2D puzzle game that predated Kirby. Your goal is to ascend the floors of a castle to save your partner who's been kidnapped. The goal of each room is to collect every heart, item, or icon on the screen. Hardcore mode? Oh, okay. Thanks, Quasi. Let me go back and edit that really quick, because it's going to bother me. Yeah, it was whatever, like... It was the second difficult... It was I think it was like the hardest available, but there's an unlockable one. So it was like the second highest or like the highest available from the start. I forget. Um, the goal, so in Adventures of Lolo, the goal of each room is to collect every heart or item icon on the screen in order to open a treasure chest, which will let you proceed to the next floor. There are enemies, hazards along the way to disrupt your puzzle-solving plans, however. You can shoot an orb. Oh, so hardcore is the locked one? Okay. It's whatever difficulties below that. I mean, I'm okay just generalizing it as hard. I think it was called something else. I just don't remember what it was. I have to load my game back up. There are enemies, hazards along the way to disrupt your puzzle-solving plans, however. You can shoot an orb at certain enemies and use them to solve certain situations or push objects even. Some enemies are turrets and will kill you if you're in their line of sight. So the game expects you to manipulate your surroundings in order to block enemy fire. The password system is generous too. Each individual floor grants you a password, and you can continue from that particular floor if you lose all of your lives. You can only move up, down, left, or right as the game is essentially on a grid. You can, however, step slightly forward and between two tiles and even push objects or enemies in a similar fashion, and you'll need to master this technique in order to solve some of the late game puzzles. That's a mouthful, what I wrote there. Adventures of Lolo's tough. It was really surprisingly hard. Oh, so here's an image of... I got to a point in this game, and I did finish it without resorting to a guide, but I felt like I was missing like a basic mechanic, so I'm playing through the Nintendo Switch Online, like virtual console kind of version, whatever you want to call it. So I'm playing without a manual, and I'm like, there's controls or there's something I'm missing. So like I Googled like the NES print of the manual for this game that someone uploaded online just to like look at the instructions, and it was in this environment part. It was what is it? Flower beds. Really? Oh, that would have been cool to watch. Yeah, I could see someone destroy. I mean, most games on GDQ are destroyed anyway, but like this would be this is like pure memorization because like everything's so like exact. Unless there's weird glitches, I don't know. But yeah, it was this flower beds, this fucking... Zoom in a little bit more. And where'd it go? Lolo can seek safety from the monsters in the flower beds, but they will wait and pounce on Lolo when he leaves the flower beds. That was like, if I didn't know that, and I didn't pick up on that while I was playing it, I never would have finished it. So I had to look at the manual. That's why I included it in my post, because I just saved a copy of it and uploaded it. It's ridiculous. So I did hit a roadblock, and this is where I wrote about it. I did hit a roadblock or two, and I got to the point where I felt like I was missing some of the basics. So I actually Googled a PDF file of the game's original NES manual. There was a description in the manual for a particular tile type where if I didn't have this knowledge, I would have never finished the game. The things you take for granted when playing retro games on modern day consoles. Adventures of Lolo isn't an easy game, and I can't imagine myself as a kid completing this without assistance. I'm proud to say, having finally visited it as an adult on the Nintendo Switch, I managed to complete the game without using the use of a guide or save states. There are apparently sequels to this game too, and I'm hoping they find their way to NSO down the road. I would love to play the sequels to this game. I'm just not gonna buy like carts at this point. I kind of like made peace with collecting for NES. I don't think I want to do it. All right, next game. We're getting halfway through-ish. Yeah, about halfway through what I finished this year, or so far this quarter. Unpacking is the flower beds in the text. Okay, yeah, so I did write there was a description in the manual for a particular tile type. I'll just put like in parentheses for now, flower beds. Where if I didn't have this knowledge, I would have never finished the game. Yeah, so like ideally I wish I could have like saved my, I wish I was recording when I was playing this so I could like splice the footage in of me like encountering that and being like, what the fuck? Like what's happening? I don't understand how to play this game. All right, so Unpacking was the 7th game I finished. Developed by... I gotcha. Developed by Witchbeam is a 2D top-down organization simulator where you simply unpack a person's belongings and store things away. What makes it unique or interesting, however, is that you're following someone's life from childhood to adulthood, and the only thing you get to see is their stuff. There's no dialogue or any other context provided as to who this person is or what their life experiences have been, other than their belongings. The items you unpack and put away tell a story that can become quite emotional once you realize what has happened. This game actually didn't hit me as hard as I wanted it to be. I listened to like a ton of gaming podcasts as well, and everyone was talking about this game for a little bit. And they're like, "Oh man, I cried at the end," or like it got a little emotional for me, and I was waiting for that punch because I love that shit. And it just didn't. Once I saw like what the reveal was, or like kind of like once I started to realize what you were unpacking, like the person's life. I don't know. It didn't. I don't know why it didn't hit me as hard as I wanted it to be. The game itself is both addicting yet exhausting. I've only ever moved once in my life, and it was both unexpected and stressful, so I can't imagine how chaotic it must feel to move multiple times during your life. Fortunately, this is a video game, so you're not actually physically moving or organizing all of these things, although it would be nice to just point at a shelf in real life and magically have your game collection fill a bookcase. So I did include a picture. This is a room that I organized too, like, so this was my own like picture from one of the game's levels. Unpacking has a lot of cool little details that make it more than a room management game. Each item you place, no matter the surface type, produces a different or authentic sound. I could give an example there. So like, for example, okay, say you grab like these kind of GameCube controller looking things, and you place it on like the table, it makes like a wooden table like clunk sound. But if you put it on the couch, it makes like a soft, like, you know, padded sound. So it does things like that. There's also a bunch of special items that you can interact with, like TVs, computers, and radio. So there's also a bunch of special items you can interact with, like TVs, computers, and a radio. Should be. There are even numerous video game systems spanning multiple generations, for example, which once activated will display a fake game on the TV created specifically for the game. By placing certain items next to each other or interacting with certain goods, you can also unlock stickers tied to the achievements, which can be placed on your pictures in photo mode. I completed the game within a few short sessions with all of the achievements unlocked. Some of these achievements are pretty tricky too. I had the right idea for 2 of them, but their trigger sequence were relatively particular or strict, so I had to resort to a guide in order to earn them. These mini in-game achievements added some extra incentive to poke around the rooms if you've already rolled the credits. Yeah, Unpacking was cool. Wow, 10,000. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, Quasi. This is definitely one of the Did this come out last year? I think it came out last year. This was one of the kind of indie darlings of late. Like every, you know, game website and podcast game group or whatever they were talking about this game, and it's cool. It's a fun little cute game. It just didn't hit me as much as I wanted it to emotionally. When other people were saying like they got kind of emotional over it. But yeah, I didn't spoil anything like that in here. Oh, cool. I'll check out the link later, Quasi. Thanks. Yeah, I'm curious if they would do a follow-up to this. Witchbeam, I think the developer is. Or I'm just curious what they'll work on next. They seem like this was like a cool little game, and I don't know if they may have made other things before, but I'm not too familiar with them. Could have been their first game. All right, Nagase, if you're still here, we've arrived at the funny game that you watched. You were like the only person watching me stream this, I think. This was back in like February, or I don't remember when this was. Okay, the 8th game that I finished in 2022 so far was Marsupilami Huba Adventure, which I think is how you say. I would think it's marsupial. Marsupilami. All right, so Marsupilami Huba Adventure is a 2D platformer developed by Oculus. It wouldn't be Oculus. I'm gonna say Oculus Studio, and it quite possibly already wins the award for worst game title of the year. What is Marsupilami, and who goes on a Huba adventure? Apparently, the character. I didn't know about this until. I didn't know about this until me and the guys. Oh, I actually googled it like on live on stream. The character name is likely based on the very same Marsupilami from the 1952 comic. I'm not sure if that's the case, but I googled like just Marsupilami and all this shit came up. I think it was like a French comic book character, had TV shows and cartoons and all sorts of shit. There may have been older games based on this character. I had no idea. I thought this was like a Disney Channel thing when I bought it. So similar to last year's Kaze and the Wild Masks, Marsupilami wears its love for Donkey Kong Country on its sleeves. The game is bright, colorful, and takes you across 3 themed islands packed with hidden secrets, bonus stages, and lots of goodies to collect. The game also has fairly decent controls and satisfying movement, surprisingly. Hey Jay Fries, how are you? The character movement has. That's oddly written. The character movement has great momentum, and you can even perform the. I had trouble naming this because I think there might be an actual name for this technique that's like coined for Donkey Kong Country. The roll off and edge and then jump technique. You'll need to incorporate this move along with some damage boosting. So I'm throwing in some like speedrunner tech lingo in here. If you're going for the gold medals in the time trials too. So I'm a sucker for world maps like this. So the reason I bought this game, I didn't know what it was based on. Obviously, it was a game geared towards children. But I love 2D. I love platformers in general, whether they're 2D or 3D. And I was just browsing game releases and message boards and forums and stuff, and I came across this game, and so everyone's like, if you want kind of like a very average like Donkey Kong Country like platformer, like don't pass on Marsupilami Huba Adventure. So I was like, fuck it. It was $20. I picked it up and like I 100%ed it in like a couple days. And I actually really liked it for what it is. But like this map, so I love dot to dot world maps. So like growing up with Donkey Kong Country or like Super Mario World even, like if you have like an overworld or like a map where literally you have like the dots leading to like the larger dots, which are the representation of like the game stages. And I love when like designers or the artists, obviously, like they try to downsize like the level you're playing and kind of make it visually, what's the word? I don't know how to describe this, but I think you know what I'm talking about if you've played platformers like this, to have maps like this. But like I love when like you create like a smaller size that's supposed to be a representation of like the level you're playing or the world you're playing, like little diorama sets almost. So the fact that this game had that, I'm like, all right, I'm sold. Like I'll play this. So the level design is nothing to write home about, but it's competent to say the least. They do a decent job of introducing new hazards and mechanics along the way, including the DKC-like barrel blasts and hidden alcoves obstructed by the foreground that you'd come to expect. That's like very in the weeds. Although it's a completely inoffensive by the books 2D platformer, there's something familiar and comforting about playing Marsupilami. 2D 3D platformers are my bread and butter, and sometimes I need a mindless, simple adventure to ground myself. There's a decent amount of content in Marsupilami as well, but it only took me about 5 hours to 100% the game. It feels like a game that's made to be someone's first video game, while it's certainly made for children. It's also quite engaging for seasoned 2D platformer fans like myself. Don't skip this one if you're starved for a wannabe DKC-like, or if you're looking for a solid 2D platformer. So yeah, this was like somewhat of a surprise. Obviously, if you've never played like Donkey Kong Country proper, I wouldn't play this over like experiencing those games, or even any of the recent like. This game kind of like, it's very inspired. It takes a lot of like visual ideas from like Tropical Freeze specifically. So if you haven't played like any of the real Donkey Kong Country games, I wouldn't like rush out to play this over this. But if you're like really trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel and you just want something to like scratch that itch, there's far worse you could play out there. Oh geez, I don't really want to talk about this game. Such a weird game. All right, the 9th game that I finished so far, 2022, is Epi. It's such a bad name too. All right, Epi, developed by Inverge, is a strange fairy tale like 3D platformer of there's my of sorts again. That was. Oh really? I don't think it's based on him though. It's a strange fairy tale like 3D platformer of sorts that was oddly hard to put down. I actually played a lot of it, or I finished it, but it's just so hard to like, unless I was streaming this and I captured the footage of it, this is really hard for me to describe. And I would, oh. It's got shades of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and other action platformers from the PS2 era. Comparing this game to Breath of the Wild might be a stretch, but there are literally, and this was my weird connection that I made, there are literally goblin encampments on the overworld comprised of like wooden scaffolding and makeshift platforms. The structure of these outposts reminded me of Link's latest epic, and completing them nets you a relic, which are collectible treasures that give you some very by-the-books world building and lore. So like, I actually have a picture of the game. It's very blurry too. Like the game, like it kind of looks that blurry from the picture that I captured of my playthrough. It's very red, but you're actually like an older bearded, like knight type character, who has like a really weird. The personality's just everything's off about the characters. Like their personality, the writing, like the dialogue's really weird. It could be like a translation. I don't know where these developers are from, so it could be like kind of just the writing wasn't. I don't know, but and like literally, if you've played Breath of the Wild, and you know those like they're literally those kind of like goblin wooden encampments that are scattered about, and there's usually like treasure in them. They're nothing like too significant. Like this game has an overworld. It's not that big. It's like a pretty small overworld. Not even close to the scale of like Zelda, obviously, but like the way they look I'm not kidding. They look like they're straight from Breath of the Wild. And that was hard to capture in my writing, but I felt like I had to mention it. The overworld houses 3 main levels and optional shrine-like challenges, which I believe can be tackled in any order. For whatever reason, the game also reminded me of Capcom's Maximo, if anyone's familiar with that, back on the PS2. It's just not as good. There's a polygonal chunkiness to the character models, and the environment visuals harken back to like janky PS2 era 3D platformers, which again I love. So like that's why I kind of dug this. The combat portions of the games have you defeating uninteresting enemy types with your shield, despite learning some new abilities along the way. It's mostly a button smasher. Level design is decent, but it's nothing special. Each main area has some simple platforming sequences and light puzzle solving. I completed the game at 100% with the Platinum Trophy earned, and it only took me around 5 hours. Again, it's another 5-hour game. So it definitely doesn't overstay its welcome. The 3 people reading this who might be interested in FE, be warned that the game locks you out of the main areas. It's my biggest pet peeve, I'm telling you. Out of the main areas once you complete them, including the overworld, which will prevent you from collecting all of the hidden relics, although the point of no return is clearly marked, so there's at least that. They do give you a warning before the final boss. They're just like, hey, turn around if you want to go try to find whatever you can, because you're not coming back. It's another autosave game that doesn't have save slots, I don't think. So like your one save file, like that's it. I can't speak to why developers would design their games this way, but there's nothing I dislike more than missables or areas that lock you out of revisiting them, especially if there isn't a chapter select or New Game Plus options. At this point in my life, it's rare for me to replay an entire game to 100% it, but I still enjoy getting the most out of a game if it makes it easy on the player. I didn't love FE, but I also didn't hate it, so I'm curious what these developers will do next. Yeah, so I don't know if this is like something I would recommend. Again, if you're starved for like 3D action platformers, which there's a ton of them out there, wouldn't be the first one I'd recommend. But again, part of like what I like to play, especially what I like to talk about, are just games that don't like who the fuck's playing or talking about FE. But it came out a couple years ago, but ooh, I read a lot about this game. Unsighted is definitely one of the best games I've played as of late. So Unsighted was the 10th game. We're already up to 10? We're getting there. The 10th game I finished of 2022. So Unsighted, developed by Studio Pixelpunk, is a top-down 2D Zelda-like with a twist. From afar, you might mistaken the game for Hyper Light Drifter or any other pixel sprite-based retro-inspired indie title as of late. But there's much more here if you take a closer look. Unsighted takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where time is of the essence. The world is inhabited by automatons or robots, and their life source is slowly depleting with no real efficient way to restore it. What's interesting here is that the narrative ties into the game's mechanics and overall structure. In Unsighted, time is slowly ticking down to your death, but this also applies to every non-controllable character or NPC in the game, including shop owners, vendors, and villagers. If their time's up, they simply go unsighted, which turns them into monsters. While you can turn off this countdown timer within the game's options, it's meant to be played with the timer, and you should. Again, like some people, countdown timers or like time restrictions stress people out, which I understand. But the game's kind of meant to be played with that. And I'm really glad I kept it on because it made the whole kind of experience like a lot better. Or more impactful, I guess you could say. During my playthrough, a ton of my vendors and townspeople turned unsighted and perished. My first death was a sweet old grandma robot who sold me cogs, which are essentially passive accessories that grant you additional benefits like an auto review. It should be auto revive. I caught an edit there. Increased damage and stamina, for example. I was in the middle of one of the game's dungeons and became so laser focused on solving a puzzle to the point where time was getting away from me. It's like a pun intended. Within the game's menus, you have a contacts list, which keeps track of each important NPC's life expectancy. I swore Grandma had more time on their hands, but before I knew it, they were gone. The game autosaves throughout, so there was no way to save and reload, even if I wanted to, although I didn't. From my understanding, 1 hour in the real world does not equate to 1 hour of time in the game's world. It was in this moment that I started to become more anxious about the stakes that were at play here. As I conquered each of the game's 5 primary dungeons, more and more NPCs started to pass away, and I couldn't do anything about it. Or could I have done something? Yeah, I only shared like the art in my completion screen, so I don't have any pictures of the game, but it looks like Hyper Light Drifter, if you've played that. To offset the time penalty, you can collect special dust items which grant either yourself or any other NPC an extra in-game 24 hours. For a good portion of the game, these dust items are finite, so you ideally want to save them for vendors who handle your upgrades and equipment. Excuse me. Each NPC has a relationship meter of sorts, and the more dust you give them increases your bonds, which grants you a bonus item at max level and their continued service. There's a constant sense of risk and reward, which is like my favorite feeling in a game here, and although it can be stressful at times, it all feels satisfying and rewarding to engage with. Also, if you feel like your playthrough is going down the drain and too many people are dying, keep going. There's a surprise or two to assist you along the way if you persist and progress far enough. So without spoiling anything, there's a moment in the game where like I got to where I'm like, I can't keep up. Like I'm playing this game at a decent pace. Everyone keeps dying. The game's not super easy either, although there are difficulty levels. And I'm like, am I gonna be able to finish this with everyone dying? And then you get to a certain point and the game does something, and I don't think you can really miss it. Where that feeling kind of goes away. Like I won't say anything else. The game's fixation, and this is where the game kind of hit me personally, which is a good thing. The game's fixation on time made me reflect on my youth and how I spend my time as an adult more than anything else right now. If I was in my late teens or early 20s, I would have kept playing this game until there was nothing left to unearth. As I've gotten older, I realize I don't have all the time in the world to do all the things I want to do, whether they be life or game related, and it makes me sad. I completed the game on Action Girl difficulty, but there's still a ton of treasure chests to find, weapons to upgrade, and a true ending to seek out. And that's in addition to extra modes like New Game Plus. There's a dungeon in Boss Rush. The game's packed with content. I loved Unsighted. It's one of the best top-down Zelda-likes, 2D Zelda-likes I've played in a long time. And if you're a fan of this subgenre of sorts, make the time for this one. It's like if I was writing a review in a game about time, my little stinger at the end would be, make the time for this one. Yeah, well, it's like something I realized a lot over the past few years, but especially now. I'm 36, like, I don't know, like, I just want to, like, play everything to death and 100% everything. It's never going to happen ever again. I think I'm just past that point. It's frustrating. Plus, I just want to keep playing a lot of different stuff. So if I just fixated on this game, you could spend so much time, like, mastering this game and like, kind of getting everything out of it. There's a lot here. But if you just want to like kind of play through it, it's like 10 hours-ish. If you're like a competent like Zelda kind of player. So it's really good. That's not that young. There's too many games, Quasi. There's too many games I want to play. There's another game I'm super mixed on, or I have like very complicated, layered feelings about. Alright, so game number 11. I actually finished a lot, surprisingly, despite all the shit I've got going on. Most of these games are pretty short, though. Game number 11 of 2022 that I've completed so far is Demon Turf. Demon Turf, developed by Fabraz, is a 3D platformer with an attitude. It nearly captures Super Mario 64's moveset and controls. You've got your triple jump, sideways backflip, and a long jump of sorts. Doesn't feel as good as it does to control Mario, but it's pretty damn close. Demon Turf is a collectathon through and through. Each level's main collectible is a battery. Think of them as power stars from Super Mario 64. But there are 3 cakes in each stage to collect as well. After you complete a world, excuse me, there are alternative stages which are even more challenging and contain even more collectibles. There's a ton of content here, and the game asks you to complete a good amount of it just to see the credits roll, which is honestly my biggest pet peeve with the game. Speaking of which, that's one of my main problems with the game. Developers ask too much of the player to the point where it seems like they really wanted you to see and do everything there is to complete. There are 56 batteries to collect in the game, and you need 50 of them just to face the final boss in order to roll the credits. That's asking the player to complete both the regular levels and nearly all of the challenging extra stage variants that unlock after you complete a world. As Beebs would say, who's the main character, there's a lot to collect, huh? Granted, I finished the game at around 15 hours, and while that isn't overly long, it's pretty beefy for a 3D platformer. I just wish the game was more fun to play, though. So I love my games with fractions. If you give me a menu with like collectibles and fractions to complete, I'll usually dig right into it. This game is too much of a good thing. Navigating the environments feels pretty good, but the level design is inconsistent, lacking cohesion, and the combat arenas are just not enjoyable. Jumping on top of Goombas or throwing fireballs at them in Mario isn't very interesting on paper, but at least it always feels good. The forced combat scenarios in Demon Turf ruin the stage flow, especially around a game that emphasizes time trials. The boss battles are really weird too. They're disproportionately difficult compared to the rest of the game. And while it's cool that they require you to use your newfound abilities in order to defeat them, they could have been executed better. The checkpoint system has its ups and downs as well. You can essentially plant a checkpoint flag anywhere in a stage, which gives the player the ability to customize the level difficulty in a sense. I found myself forgetting to plant the flags whenever I really needed to because some stages were way longer than others, and I would simply forget it was an option due to the inconsistency. I finished Demon's Turf at around 55% of the game completed, and while I enjoyed parts of the game, I'm not in any rush to come back to it. I was really looking forward to Demon Turf because it's a no-nonsense 3D platformer that just has an emphasis on collecting shit. But it's just I like the way it controls. The level design just feels like someone got a hold of a level editor and just kind of threw some ideas down and then separated them into levels without any kind of thought. I could be kind of unfairly judging them that way, but that's what they felt like to me. Especially when the creator just released, I think the PC version has a level editor, so I'm I don't know. When a game has a level editor, I feel like there's something taken away from probably this is super generalizing, but I'm not convinced that the levels you created for your game are going to be that good if your game has a level editor. I don't know why I feel that way, but that's what my thoughts were while playing this. But yeah, it feels good to jump around and speed around the levels. The level design's so all over the place. And it's so long. It's such a long game. They should have maybe cut the requirement of the collectibles down to half just to finish it. It would have been a lot better. All right, we're getting there. We're almost done. The 12th game I finished was Pixel Junk Shooter Ultimate. Developed by Q Games, is a twin stick shooter that originally released back on the PS3. Shooter Ultimate is a collection of the previous games, the greatest hits, if you will, but with some extra features. Although it's an arcade-like side-scrolling shooter at its core, the game is way more exploration-based and slower paced than other games in the genre. Each level is comprised of 5 screens and there are 6 worlds. The levels last a bit too long for my liking, but there's something extremely satisfying about saving all of the stranded people and collecting the hidden gems along the way. The game introduces new ideas and mechanics as you progress in an attempt to keep things fresh too, but I found myself only managing a stage or two before I became tired. Some levels contain power-ups that allow you to shield yourself from lava, while other areas let you play with light sources in order to traverse pitch-black caverns. Each world also culminates with well-designed, challenging boss battles. Yeah, I love pixel junk games too, Quasi. Yeah, and I knew... excuse me. I knew this was like I wrote, this is a collection of like the first two games, like expanded a little bit, I think. So it was like playing two games back to back. But yeah, like I haven't played these games like for years. Because I downloaded a lot of the Pixel Junk stuff over the years. But just a part of me was like, I feel like playing this, so I just started playing it like a month ago or 2 months ago. They're like, I mean, I like twin stick shooters in general, and this one just had like, it was like an exploration based twin stick shooter. Okay. Oh wow. Usually I try to write a little bit more in between my pictures. Yeah, it's apparently Pixel Junk Shooter 1 and 2, like combined into one game. So like there's 6 worlds, I think, is what I wrote. It was 6 worlds, right? Yeah. So like I think the first game was just 3 worlds. I could be wrong. But yeah, this game took me a long time to play through. I completed the single player portion of the game at 100%, including the secret level for collecting all of the gems, which was fairly difficult. There are online leaderboards and even an online versus battle mode, which was dead, by the way. I tried searching for a game, and no one obviously was like found. So I said, does anyone want to boost the multiplayer trophies on PSN like it's 2009, so I can get my platinum trophy? Literally, the only trophies I'm missing are the multiplayer ones, and there's obviously no one's playing. No one's playing this anymore, but the servers are still up. So Quasi, if you have this on PS4 and you want to boost some multiplayer trophies, let me know. Alright. These are a little shorter. I squeezed in some shorter games. Okay. That's all good. Yeah, I almost went to like a trophy message board forum and like there was like one post in there from like years ago, and I was like, I wonder if I made a post if someone would like find my, you know, PSN account name and send me a message and be like, I'll grab them. It would take like really a short amount of time, I think. It's just like, it's dead. No one's ever coming back to that. I don't even know why. I'm surprised the servers are up. So the 13th game I finished was actually a replay. I've played this before. It's a Short Hike, which is incredible, by the way. I first played, I'm going to pronounce his name. I think this is the name of the developer, Adam Gyru? A Short Hike back at the start of the global pandemic in 2020. And it was one of the most enjoyable, pleasant gaming experiences I had at the time. I've been meaning to replay the game and go for 100% completion, so I bought the PS4 version on sale recently and decided a revisit was in order. Similarly to the feelings I had in March of 2020, there's something about playing this game when the world is in chaos. We've entered the 3rd year of the pandemic, but now we've welcomed a horrendously scary situation or war between Russia and the Ukraine to the mix. A Short Hike continues to be the perfect example of pure distilled joy or escapism during troubled times, and I'm extremely grateful for it. I said it before, and it still rings true. A Short Hike feels as if someone took the tutorial or starting island from The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and made an entire game out of it. That was always the best way I described this game. It feels like a starting area from a Zelda game, Wind Waker specifically, which is what I wrote. Only that's the whole game, because it's very short. This is kind of a spoiler, but when you finish the game, you have to get to the peak of this mountain. Yeah, the Short Hike's incredible. I really want these developers to do something next. I hope they're working on something. But I wrote, like, this is how I feel when I'm traveling in the plane lands safely. I have so much anxiety about flying, and I'm taking a trip in early May on a pretty long flight. So I'm very nervous and anxious about it. So I'm just gonna have to think about the little crow bird buddy and how they get to the top of this mountain and they feel relieved. Yeah, this game makes me think about a lot of things. And I'm always playing it. It's funny, I started it literally the first weekend we were sent home at the start of the pandemic. This was free on the Epic Game Store, I believe, and I downloaded it for PC. And I remember just feeling so like, what the fuck's happening? Work's crazy. Like, what's going on? Like, are we ever going back? Like, what's happening? I remember playing this game and it just completely like took my mind off everything. And then I started replaying this when like kind of the start of the Russian-Ukraine war that's still going on. Because I just was like reading all of that and then compounding that with like the pandemic that's ongoing still. I'm just like, I can't, like, this is like all, there's just too fucking much shit's going on. So I'm like, I want to replay this. So I started playing it again. There's an immediate sense of discovery or progression here that's hard to capture. A short hike is about low-key exploration, helping others, and solving simple environmental puzzles. There are golden feathers to collect, which act as permanent stamina upgrades, and they allow the player to explore more of the just big enough island. The pacing is nearly perfect, and the writing is simple yet charming. It's also a game that can be beaten within an hour or two, but there's a decent amount of side activities, secrets to discover, and items to collect if you're willing to take a detour or two, which you should. I completed a short hike with the Platinum Trophy after 6 hours or so there's a decent amount of content here if you're looking to spend more time on this lovely mountain of sorts. I'm hoping the developers have been working on something new because I can't wait to see what they do next. Yeah, short hike's awesome. Play it whenever if you haven't played it. It's on like everything at this point. Just maybe except for Xbox. It's good. All right, so far, this is my favorite game of the first quarter. We're almost at the end. So, yeah, so there's fishing. The fishing takes a while because there's a lot of like RNG with like the fish you can collect. And what else took a really long time? I think it's the fishing that added a lot of time because I was trying to find. There's a bunch of little hidden things in that game that take like a surprising amount of time to do if you're if you're not using a guide, obviously. I was trying to like not resort to anything because it was just fun to like fly around that island and look for stuff. But yeah, if you go for 100%, there's like some good stuff there. And God, I love Sol Cresta. Sol Cresta, developed by Platinum Games and Hamster, is a sequel to the 1980s cult classic arcade shooters. Excuse me. Talking too much, my mouth's losing it. My voice. Terra Cresta and Moon Cresta. The main gameplay gimmick mechanic that separates Sol Cresta from other arcade shooters is its formations. Once you've assembled your 3 ships together, you can collect formation chips, which grant you the ability to transform into different attack variations. While it doesn't seem like these formations are required to engage with on the lower difficulties, they definitely give the player the upper hand. These formations act like traditional screen-clearing bombs in other arcade shooters, but you have much more control over them. There are 5 formations total, and the chips are color-coded with a secret, powerful formation that becomes available once you unlock the others. Your ships are blue, red, and yellow, and there are special enemies crates that can only be destroyed by the same color firepower. There's even special rings to fly through, which grant the player more bonus points if you fly through them with the correct colored ship. Giant rocks and meteors, for example, are destroyed more easily with the yellow ship, as its missiles are drill-like weapons. So I get really hardcore into like the mechanics of this game very quickly. I played through normal difficulty stage by stage until I got to the final level. After I beat the final boss and the credits rolled, the game automatically loops you back to at the start of the game. Let me write to the start. Loops you back to the start of the game on the next difficulty. For whatever reason, although I was exhausted from beating my head against the wall during the final boss on normal, I decided I would keep playing until I lost all of my lives as my high score carried over from the previous run. A lot of arcade shooters do this anyway. Nearly an hour later, I played through the entirety of hard difficulty in a sitting and unlocked Platinum Hard mode. I eventually ran out of steam by the second level, but I just couldn't stop playing, and I would have kept going if I had the energy for it. Soul Crester had its hooks in me, and I finally understood how to play the game. Although there's a ton of replay incentive in the base game, the dramatic story DLC is a tough sell, however. For $10, you play through the same levels that are available in arcade mode, with a few extra twists. I'll explain this Star Fox 64 image in a second. For one, there's Japanese VO and cutscenes that make an attempt at telling a story. It's mostly anime space opera nonsense, but it has the same banter, chatter you would hear when playing through a mission from Platinum Games' very own The Wonderful 101. The problem, however, is that unless you can understand the Japanese language, it's nearly impossible to pay attention to the dialogue in the upper right or left corners of the screen. All of the dialogue is located underneath the character portraits, and when you're playing an intense arcade shooter, it doesn't really lend itself to reading, unless you're a master at hand-eye coordination and multitasking. The game does only allow you to play through the story mode on easy or normal difficulty, so it never gets too intense, but it's still challenging. It also appears that the story mode stages add additional slow-moving, less enemy-populated sequences during most of the cinematics, so the new players couldn't reasonably play and read at the same time. It still would have been nice to have English VO, but perhaps it wasn't in the budget, although they did charge $10 for this, so what gives? The final boss in the DLC is much more difficult than the regular game, so I'm glad I powered through and saw the true ending. Soul Crester is one of my favorite games of the year, and it's a shame Platinum Games has had such a poor image lately due to Babylon's Fall, because this game is genuinely good and worth your time. I probably could... Oh, that was the last game I finished for the year, or for the quarter, rather. Yeah, so Soul Crester, I got really deep into mechanics when I wrote about it, because I just was like... I was trying to understand how to play the game, so I figured I was writing this down as I was playing, like when I was drafting this blog post. So I'm just like, what's happening in this game? Let me try to put it in words and like understand how the mechanics work. So mostly the post is very like mechanics driven. But yeah, Soul Crester is like a top-down arcade shooter. If you played anything like, it's not like Darius or Gradius, games like that, because that's like a side-scrolling shooter. It's more like if you played Sky Shark, which is like on the NES. I do have a lot. That's what I'm saying. I like a lot of stuff, Quasi. It's very rare for me to hate something. This will make my top 10 likely though. There's a lot of good stuff so far this year. Stuff I'm still playing that I haven't finished. But Soul Crester is going to make my top 10 for sure. But yeah, this is like a top-down flying forward shooter, not like a left to right shooter, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's very hardcore, it's very difficult, but if you like arcade shooters, it's pretty pricey. I think it's worth the price if you're a fan of the genre. If not, like if you're looking for a game like this, I would recommend it over anything that's out there right now. I have somewhat of a bias because I love Platinum Games so much. But yeah, Soul Crester is very, very good. So the Star Fox 64 picture, I included this because and this is very particular to the story mode DLC that you have to buy in addition to the base game. But the story mode DLC has like pilot chatter and an actual story that's told. When you get to a boss and you kill a boss, they have these sort of like death cry sequences where they like cry out to their leader. And if you've played Star Fox 64, Star Fox does something similar, where like when you beat a boss, like for example, like this first boss will go like, "My Emperor, I've failed you," and then they explode or whatever. It's really over dramatic and kind of funny. But Soul Crester does that the exact same thing. So like that's a very particular thing from Star Fox that I loved, because I loved that as a kid. like that stuck with me as a kid with shooters. Like when shooters attempt to have a story or character portraits or like chatter between the pilots, and like when a pilot's going down, and they just go like, you know, no, like Soulcrester does that, Star Fox does that. So if you like that, that's my way to sell you on Soulcrest. The DLC specifically. So the arcade mode, the base game does not have that stuff, but pick up the DLC and you'll see that. All right. The last part of this is like I do my physical pickups. So I took pictures of everything that I picked up this year, and I spent a decent amount on stuff. So I'm just gonna quickly kind of go over my pickups. So I bought a few collector's editions and then some like kind of loose, you know, regular pickups. So I think obviously my priciest things, Horizon Forbidden West, Elden Ring, and the Destiny 2 newest expansion collectors. I'm like 40 hours into Elden Ring, like 15 into Horizon. I finished the campaign and most of the current season stuff and the newest campaign in Destiny 2. So I've been playing those three a lot. But I'm still kind of a physical game collector at heart. And I'm fortunate enough at the moment that I can like buy a lot of this stuff, I guess you could say. And then I picked up a bunch of other things like Babylon's Fall. Well, I wrote a little bit about it. But so I said the first quarter of 2022 saw the releases of many. Yeah, there's a this elephant is a statue in there. So I kept it in the box. I haven't taken it out yet. I don't have the room really to display it right now. Maybe eventually. There's a giant like one of the, you know, the mechanical elephant monsters or machines in there. But the first quarter of 2022 saw the release of many anticipated AAA releases, an endless onslaught of indies, and all of the in-between. Ghostwire Tokyo, Elden Ring, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land were probably my most wanted games from Q1 2022, but I couldn't help myself from picking up a bunch of other goodies too. Despite having never finished a Pokemon game since Red and Blue, I picked up Legends Arceus against my better judgment. I'm only like a handful of hours into that game. I'm 10 to 15 hours into Horizon Forbidden West, and similar to how I feel about the first game, I'm liking it but not loving it. So this is like a preview into like if I do finish these games by the end of June, so that would be the quarter two. I'll write about them, or I'll include them in my finished blog post for Q2 of 2022. I don't think I will though. I don't think I'll have the time to finish because those games are huge. Elden Ring and Forbidden West. Destiny 2 The Witch Queen was probably one of the best expansions Bungie has released in a minute, but I unfortunately had to solo the campaign on my own, which wasn't very fun at times. The only three games I've yet to play or try out from the picture above are Triangle Strategy, Babylon's Fall, and Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. So I picked those up. Marsupilami's there. I streamed Eternal Cylinder, Darius HD, and Marsupilami in one stream like a couple months ago. So I finished Marsupilami, obviously, because I wrote about it. I only played this for a little bit, G Darius, and same with Eternal Cylinder. So I don't know if I'll finish them by the end of Q2 or even the end of this year. But if I do, I'll write about them. I did not list my digital pickups here, but I have downloaded a few. There's just way too much good stuff to play this year, and the hits aren't slowing down anytime soon. Oh, and this is my... So, I did a separate picture for my limited run pickups. So, limited run games is like a boutique specialty website that does like limited print runs, physical print runs of digital only games. And they do collector's editions as well. So some of these I ordered like maybe a year or so ago. I know. Well, see, I've been at the same job for 10 years, Quasi, and it's financial reporting, and everything we do is based on quarters. So all of my real job work is quarterly. So like I can't look at it. Well, as much as I hate it, I really don't like my job. It's soulless. It's miserable. It's afforded me the things that I like, and I can survive off of it for now. Um, but because I've been like in that space for so long, I've adapted it into like how I look at the year. So because like we're, you know, each part of the year is split up into 4 quarters, like I base everything I do around like the quarters of the year. So like, and that's why I like writing within quarter brackets, because it makes me like kind of think of like the months in 3 chunks. And it's enough time to like for me to reflect on things that I experienced, like, but it's also not too short where I'm like writing down and like, you know, releasing blog posts or whatever like every week or something. So I don't know, it works for me mentally, even though it's kind of exhausting. But yeah, so these limited run games pickups, some of these I ordered like a year or 2 ago, but because of the pandemic, all the like shipping problems and all the parts shortages and all that kind of shit. Yeah, that's a good way. That works too, actually, Quasi. So I could, you know, make it less like robotic and businessy. I should just be like this is like my winter quarter, and then it would be spring, summer, and fall. That would be more like pleasant to picture in my head than like Q2. What did I play during, you know, April through June or whatever? What is my financial report for the quarterly results? No, it's all good. My mind like I'm trying to like read and respond as I see like questions. So I usually just break my train of thought and just go right into it when I see it. It's fine. But yeah, like this Scott Pilgrim thing I bought, I ordered that like a year and a half ago, and it finally showed up like last month. Same with a lot of these, like this fucking Panzer Dragoon, which I really want to play, even though I heard this port isn't very good. And there's Effie, that's where I picked up Effie, and I played through it. I really want to play this Panzer Dragoon game. Because I love, that's like a classic Sega Saturn on rails arcade shooter, but I heard the port's kind of whatever, but it's been updated since, so we'll see. But yeah, that is my Q1 blog post. These little controller graphics, this is done by my graphic design friend who made these for me, and a link to his like portfolio and his work is on my main about section on my Twitch channel or whatever. But those, I've recently added those to my blog post to give them like a more custom look. I think they're pretty cool looking. But yeah, so just to summarize, the games I finished were Sol Cresta, Short Hike, Pixel Junk Shooter Ultimate, Demon Turf, Unsighted, Effie, Marsupilami Huba Adventure, Unpacking, Adventures of Lolo, Solar Ash, Oliha, The Gunk, and Clockwork Aquario, and then Mega Man 5, which is what I started, first game I started playing this year, or a replay of it rather. Out of everything I played during the first quarter, I think, like I said, if I had to pick my top 3, it would be Sol Cresta, which did release this year, so this again has a running to be in my top 10 for 2022. So only games that have released for the current year make that list. I would say Sol Cresta Unsighted, which came out last year technically. So that could be, this game has a running to be in my like late to the party game of the year, which means like my favorite game that I played for the first time in 2022 that didn't technically release in 2022. And then my other third favorite might be either Solar Ash, or I really like Clockwork I mean, the gunk was cool too. I don't know. Clockwork Aquaria I really liked as well. Honestly, I think my least favorite thing was Demon or Effie or Demon Turf were the things that turned me off the most. And this one hurts more because I thought I was gonna like love it. So yeah, that is my yeah, appreciate it, Quasi. Yeah, I hope that was again last year, towards the end of last year, I read through all of my quarterly blog posts. I read through 4 blog posts like this. They're archived on my YouTube channel now, which is also on my about section. I read through like 4 of these kind of blog posts like within a week or two span, so it was like really like it was a last minute idea that I had, and I'm like, shit, like I have my posts written. Like, let me just try to make Twitch streams of that and reading through it or whatever. So going forward, my idea was like, maybe I'll be more on top of it now because it's something I want to proactively do. So I was only about a month late. I said at the start of the stream, streams like this, I would like to do, if I wrote everything I kind of wanted to write about the games that I finished, normally I would stream this like at the end of the quarter. So like March 31st or April 1st. So I'm about a month late to sharing this. But I want to stream it first, kind of edit or tweak it live, and then I'll post it like on Twitter or share it officially on like my WordPress site or whatever after the fact. So that's like my process, I guess. Just trying to make more synergy between like the stuff that I've worked on. But yeah, so far I've finished 2 games in 2020 or in quarter 2 so far this quarter or this spring rather. So I'll hopefully have some write-ups for them by the end of June, in addition to anything else that I happen to finish. Yeah, hopefully I'm hoping it'll be sometime in June. So if it won't be it definitely won't be the beginning of, oh no, sorry, so it's April, May, January, February, March, April, May, June. Oh, so it'll be the end of June, beginning of July. Ideally, and if not, it'll be sometime in July. And actually, the quicker I get it out is based on how many games that I finish. Like I finished 14 games already within the first quarter of the year, which I wasn't expecting to do. So I always like to write at least a paragraph or 2 for each game that I finish. So that's why it takes me a little bit longer to get my blog post out. So if I don't finish like a ton of games this quarter, then it'll be faster for me to write up something and do like a stream like this again. But yeah, hopefully I archive them, or I keep archiving them. If you want to check out like you know, the VOD or the archive of it, it'll be on my YouTube channel as well. But yeah, I appreciate catching some of my edits as well, Quasi. That was fun. That was like an idea that I had. I really wanted to see if like I could catch like mistakes or grammatical or spelling errors as I talked through my posts. So I'm glad you liked it. But yeah, so I'm gonna wrap it up. I think I'm gonna stream early tomorrow morning. I'm gonna do a very quick stream with a game that I've been playing, like an idea that I've had. Not really an idea. There's something in a game I've been playing that I really want to do, and I think I'm gonna try to capture it on stream. But after that, I'm not sure when I'll stream next. I'm gonna be away in May for most of it. Like I said, I'll be traveling, so I won't be home to do a lot of things. So again, my streams will become sporadic or unexpected as they usually are. But I don't plan on stopping. I'll just continue to do them when I'm able to. But yeah, thanks for everyone who stopped in. Big Ace, Jay Fries, if you're still there, Quasi, anyone else, I really appreciate it. And if I don't see y'all tomorrow, or anyone else tomorrow. Have a good weekend. I will see everyone again soon. So, all right. Good night. Take care.